VikesNow, I am Dustin Baker, and we are coming to you with our Vikings win-loss predictions game by game because don't look now. The Vikings-Giants game is just 4 days away, and by the time you folks listen to this, it could already be game day for Ravens-Chiefs, a fantabulous opener on Thursday Night Football. I'm here with my fabulous homie, Josh Frey. How's it going, man?
I'm doing good, man. Like you said, I'm just stoked to get this season started. We've been waiting for months for this, and with everything that's going on in the league over the past few months, with all the turnover and everything, can the Chiefs three-peat or the Vikings even have a shot to make the playoffs this year? We're going to go through that today, and I'm excited to do it.
If you it's really weird that this line is so it was a pick 'em until about a week ago. Now the Vikings are favored by a point or two over the Giants. And if you look at the all of the matchups in the NFL, in terms of pundits predictions, like the Vikings and Giants is the tightest game in terms of variance. When you're heading into a week one, usually you kind of look at last year's rosters or the draft and be like, oh yeah, the blah blah blahs are going to crush the blah blah blahs. But in terms of who to pick, if you go to NFL pickwatch.com, it's a compilation of all experts' picks. The Vikings and Giants are truly 50-50 for who folks are predicting, and there's hardly any of them like that. So a point of order that this game should be tight. At least that's what the masses say. So we're going to launch right into this game by game. I don't need a humongous speech on each game, Josh, but maybe a little bit more on the Giants game because we are so damn close to this. I'm going to probably steal your thunder. I'm taking the Vikings to win this one, mainly because I believe that Brian Flores' defense can rattle Daniel Jones. Until I see it, I don't have a lot of trust in the offense. I need to see with my own eyes that Sam Darnold can be a reclamation Baker Mayfield type, but I don't have any anxiety about the defense. So I think the Vikings win this thing about 24-20 before we get to the really nasty part of the schedule. I have the Vikings 1-0, and this is not a homer take. I've really deliberated on it. I even was picking the Giants in July in my head, but here I am taking the Vikings. What say you, week one?
I'm right there with you, honestly. I was kind of like you. I could have seen this one going either way for a while, but then I just settled on the Vikings because I think both of these defenses are going to be really good this season. But kind of like you, I need to see it from both of these offenses to really believe in either of them. But at the end of the day, I think with Aaron Jones, Ty Chandler combo in the backfield, we've seen what Aaron Jones has done over the years. We saw Ty Chandler kind of emerge last year, and then Justin Jefferson at wide receiver, Jordan Addison, Jalen Naylor, assuming he actually is playing because he's a little bit banged up right now.
No
Which,
way.
yeah, right. That's a big shocker after a whole summer of floating like this is going to be the year, and now he's on the sidelines. Hopefully, he's all right though. But yeah, I'm going with the Vikings. I think that the Malik Neighbors pick this spring is really interesting for the Giants in terms of potentially finally getting a true wide receiver one. But man, he feels like the same type of guy as a Jalen Hyatt going into New York, where he's got all the wheels in the world. He can run some routes, but I think he's definitely more suited to be a deep threat type of player, but that just kind of feels like every single receiver on the Giants right now. And I just need to see them all work in tandem to believe that it's actually going to work. So I think the Vikings go into MetLife and win this one.
Beautiful. Did you attach a score to that?
I didn't, but let's go 17-14 Vikings
Okay.
in a nail biter.
So it'll be presumably pretty sloppy week one
Yeah.
vibes. Okay.
Yeah.
And then just out of curiosity, before we launch into Vikings 49ers, do you think an immediate impact that Rome Odunze or Malik Neighbors will stand off the page when it's all said and done in this January or whatever?
I like Malik Neighbors a little bit more as a player, but I think with Daniel Jones being his quarterback, I feel like Odunze is going to have a little bit of a better season this year.
Okay. All right. So we both maybe the viewers could just turn off the show now. No,
Yeah.
I'm kidding because we're getting to the 49ers. There's a world where if the Vikings did what they were supposed to last year and just lost to the 49ers, didn't have a game-saving touchdown by Jordan Addison, which was basically a stripped fumble that he took away from the defender, I would say, you know what, the Vikings can win this one. But I think that it's just too lucky that they beat the 49ers in back-to-back games. There could be, in theory, injuries and all that, but I'm not going to be the guy, maybe you will, that picks the Vikings over the 49ers. So the Vikings lose this one, and then we're like, all right, we're back to earth. What about you?
Yeah, I also see the 49ers winning this one. I put out my standings predictions for the season on Vikings territory yesterday, and I think this is going to be a little bit of a tougher year for the 49ers than some people are saying, but this roster, especially now that Brandon Ayuk and Trent Williams are locked up for the next few years, they got all that baggage out of the way. I think that the 49ers are going to come into Minnesota and win for the first time since 1994.
Yeah, I love that stat. I love that
Yeah.
because there's no good reason that the Vikings should have any type of dominance over the 49ers. Now, albeit it's home field, they do have that really sweet stat. My next caveat for the Texans game, week 3, is if the Vikings find a way to lose to the Giants, I don't think they're going to go 0-3. So if they somehow lose to the Giants, I think they're going to make up ground, find a way to win at home, beat the Texans. But I pick the Giants, so regrettably, I think the Texans win this game. I will be there for it. I really hope that the Vikings' home field supremacy is restored because one of our dirtiest little sins last year is this team went 2-6 at home, which is dreadful for anybody. I don't care who it is. And usually that place, US Bank Stadium, is a fortress for Vikings wins. But because I picked the Giants, I got the Texans over the Vikings. Do you?
I'm actually picking the Vikings in this
Oh,
one.
sweet.
I think Brian Flores is going to dial up some fancy defensive scheme against CJ Stroud that he hasn't quite seen at the NFL level yet this year. And I think the Vikings are going to come into this one with a little bit of a chip on their shoulder, rematching against Stephon Diggs, Daniil Hunter, all those guys, Cam Akers, all those guys. But yeah, I kind of sneaky feel like the Texans might be a disappointment team this year. I just feel like there's a bad vibe around that team sometimes. Like bringing in Diggs, who knows what's going to happen with that? That could absolutely blow up in their face in the next 3 months. CJ Stroud's is a really great quarterback, but I think that there were some flaws that were kind of hidden over the past year with Texans just coming out of absolutely nowhere to win that division last year. So I think they kind of take a little bit of a step back, and I have the Vikings winning at home.
Quarterback slumps are a real thing, sophomore slumps, I should say. And it wouldn't be strange at all for CJ Stroud to return to this stratosphere. And then by the time we're doing the show next year, he's good, really good again in 2025. So if he has a down year, which I agree could happen, it wouldn't surprise me one iota. So I'm right there with you. I'm indifferent about the Texans. I really don't care if they take a step back. CJ Stroud, if you'll recall, was my guy if the Vikings were going to get a quarterback a year early from McCarthy, but it was just too expensive to go that high up the draft board. All right, we had our first split with the Texans. I like your version better. Going to Lambeau. I have the Vikings starting 1-3. I just don't think that they will beat the Packers, although the Packers last year were kind of how we were just talking about with CJ Stroud. Jordan Love, like we are all, no, not we, but the NFL world is, thinks he's the sweetest thing that you could imagine, but he wasn't good every game last year. There were a lot of turds before he finally figured it out. Nevertheless, I don't think the Vikings win at Lambeau. What about you?
Yeah, I'm on the same page again. The Packers, I think they've had the Vikings number, especially at Lambeau over the past couple of years. Granted, some of those games have been a little bit weird with injuries and everything for the Vikings, but I do think that the Packers are going to be really damn good this year, which pains me to say. But yeah, I have the Vikings losing at home and losing on the road and dropping to 2-2.
So let's see. They won last year, the Kirk's final game as a Viking. Almost damn near coughed it away with Jaron Hall in there. And then was it the time before that, the 2020 windy game where Dalvin exploded?
That was that's right.
Yeah. So those are the two times in recent memory when, we'll take it, beating the Packers on their turf twice in the last 4 seasons. All right. I have the Jets game. I vacillated here because I want to pick them to either win this one or against the Lions at home. I ultimately chose them losing to the Jets. When I did my NFL standing predictions, I couldn't decide if I wanted the Jets or the Bengals to represent the AFC. I do believe in this Jets experiment because Aaron Rodgers doesn't need to be the MVP 2021 Aaron Rodgers. He just needs to be healthy and throw about 25 touchdowns. And I think he can do that. So I think the Vikings finally, their first ever loss in London. They are undefeated, 4-5-0 exhibition and regular season games. I think it comes to an end and the Vikings sorrowfully start 1-4.
I kind of agree. These London games are always weird to pick. But yeah, I don't really trust Sam Darnold going up against Aaron Rodgers. And that Jets defense is going to be
Hmm.
absolutely fantastic again this season. That's the reason that the Jets won 7 games last year. And like you said, if Aaron Rodgers can just be like 60% of what he normally
Hmm.
is, I think that the Jets can definitely be a playoff team this year and compete for that AFC East division. So yeah, I have the Vikings losing this one as well, heading into the bye.
And you have 2 and 3. Notably, this bye week is earlier than the last couple of years. Jordan Addison should have his court date or Zoom court date, whatever it's going to be the day after in California. I don't know if a suspension would hit that soon. Maybe. This is also would be probably the failsafe for TJ Hawkinson to start to return, although there's some smoke that says he could be ready for that Jets game. So that's some perspective. This is also we thought McCarthy would probably take over because the Vikings would be 2 and 3 or 1 and 4. Of course, we can't have nice things. After the bye week, I have them beating the Lions at home. I still believe that they can get back to respectability at home. The Lions will be good, but I keep looking at this Vikings roster and I'm oddly optimistic, even though McCarthy isn't there waiting in the wings. The roster feels like it's the deepest it's been in about 4 or 5 years. And so when you ask, like, why the hell is this guy picking them to beat the Lions? Everybody picks the Lions. I think the Vikings can win at home over the Lions, chiefly because it's a division game and they have a deep roster.
Yeah, I mean, for about 4 or 5 years there, this would be just a one where you're like, yep,
Mm-hmm.
this is going to be a Vikings W, no matter what the situation is. But over the past 3 years now, the Lions have won. It's 4 out of their last 5 against the Vikings, and I think that trend continues this year. I have the Vikings dropping this one, falling to 2-4.
Okay, so now we're even, which is a
Yep.
point of order. This next game, unless something weirdly changes, I'm going to it, so I don't expect them to win. This is prime time Thursday night at the Rams. McVay versus O'Connell, Darnold versus probably Stafford if everybody's healthy. One of the things I've said on a few different podcasts, other than this one, especially when McCarthy was still healthy, I was asked, like, what do you need to see from McCarthy for him to be a successful draft pick? And I have a weird response. It's I need to see the Vikings win games on the road on grass at 3 o'clock, Central Time at prime time. Since I've been a fan almost 30 years, if I see a game like this on the schedule, on the road at a good team at the Rams, that's a loss. I shouldn't have to feel that way. If McCarthy is the real deal, he can take us out of that mentality where you don't look at a schedule and be like, oh, that game is in on the West Coast at 3:15, 3:25 p.m. They're going to lose it because of the time frame. I shouldn't have to feel that way. Because McCarthy has not taken the baton yet, I still think we're going to be in that version of Vikings football. And I think they lose to the Rams, dropping them to 2-5.
I actually am going the other way. I think this is a game where after that Lions loss, Kevin O'Connell goes into the locker room, gives one of his fiery speeches. Brian Flores kicks his defense into gear, and I think the Vikings in an attempt to try to save their season and try to get back into playoff contention, I think they end up going to LA and win this game, improve to 3-4.
On the short week, no less. What is
Yeah.
your on the Rams? Did you have them about 9-8, 8-9? Where did they fall?
I had him at 8-9.
Okay.
It's a weird situation. I think this NFC West is just gonna beat up on each other all year.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of these teams are pretty similar. Like obviously, I think the 49ers are gonna come away as the division winners, but I think with the Seahawks in there and Arizona potentially getting a little bit better with a full season of Kyler Murray and Marvin Harrison Jr. coming in as easily the best wide receiver that Kyler Murray has played with over the past few years. I think that the Rams are going to be probably around that 8 and 9 spot this season.
And that would have them flirting with the 7th seed for most of December and early January, I would think, based on most folks' standings. All right, we have arrived in this exercise to week 9 at home against the Colts. And for those who are just coming back to Vikings football from, the summer off, this is when the schedule is less deadly. This is where I have identified, and I think you have too, from the very beginning when this thing came out in May, like where we breathe and exhale, like, all right, the rest of these games aren't absolutely unwinnable, like the stretch that we just went through outside of course, the Giants. So I have them this is like one of the most certain that I could be about a Vikings win this far out. I think they beat the Colts at home. Not that I think the Colts really suck or anything like that, but this would be this type of game where you got to win if you want to be relevant whatsoever, because you just got done with that brutal schedule, and we'll be elated to not have to look down at all of these like Pro Bowl quarterbacks. No slight at Anthony Richardson. Do you have a Vikings victory against the Colts?
I have them losing to the Colts in
Man,
this one. I think the Colts are going to be really damn good this year. And granted, I'm just about always wrong about the AFC South whenever I try to predict them. So I'm probably wrong about this one too. But Shane Steichen, what he did last year with that offense, losing Anthony Richardson and then Gardner Minshew carrying them to 9 wins, I think the defense is going to be a little bit better this year too. But Anthony Richardson coming in, he's a dynamic athlete at the quarterback position, about as dynamic as you're going to get. And I think that the Colts are going to come into Minnesota and win.
I'm going to have to remember that. We have one final fantasy draft tonight, the Vikings territory fantasy draft. So I'm going to have to remember you potentially sniping Anthony Richardson if we get to the middle rounds.
In our last one.
I will remember. Thank you for tipping your hat. The next 2 games are back-to-back AFC games, and I waffled. I wasn't sure which one I'd pick the Vikings to win. So I chose them losing to the Jaguars, and that is on November 10th. I think so the Jaguars got lucky that the Eagles had a grand collapse last year, because the Jaguars was almost as ugly, especially with their social media team tweeting out playoff ticket prices or whatever it was. But I think that Trevor Lawrence, even though he may not blossom into that top 10, top 5 super stellar quarterback that we all thought he would be 3 years ago, I think Doug Peterson is trustworthy enough to get them back in the mix of a wild card playoff spot. And because this is on the road, per my last speech, I think the Vikings lose to the Jaguars week 10. What about you?
Yeah, viewers might remember I had the Jaguars as the number 1 seed in the AFC last year, and that ended up being an absolute disaster.
You were flying high. You were flying high for 2 months, homie.
Yeah, that last month was just a free fall down back to the ground. But I think the Vikings go into Jacksonville and win this one. I think it's gonna. I don't really know what to think about the Jaguars after what happened over that last month and a half last year. Maybe they do bounce back and turn back into a playoff contender and go on and like that was 2022 when they had that comeback win over the Chargers and everything looked like it was going to be awesome in Jacksonville. So maybe they do bounce back to that. I just again, I kind of just need to see it to actually fully buy into the sentiment that they can fully bounce back. So I have Minnesota going in first of 3 straight road games. They need to set a tone, and I have them going into Jacksonville and winning.
I should say that the reason I either kind of believe in the Jaguars or pick them to win this game is I trust Doug Peterson. I don't really like him, but I trust him. If their coach was, John Davis,
not Urban Meyer anymore.
Yeah. Urban Meyer or my anonymous John Davis promoted from the so-and-so staff, I wouldn't really give a damn about them, but because of his credo, I do trust Peterson to make them at least 9-8. All right, so to pay the piper here in a good way, I am taking them to beat the Titans, although I think Will Levis will be a pretty good quarterback. One of my friends who's been on the show a couple times in the past, Wes Johnson, is really high on Will Levis for fantasy value if you want to wait late to get a quarterback. I digress. I'll take the Vikings to beat the Titans by a touchdown or so, getting them closer to the equator of 500, but not quite there yet.
Yeah, I'm going to do the exact same thing. I think the Vikings go into Tennessee and win this one as well. The Titans have done some weird stuff this offseason, between the coaching change and then bringing Tony Pollard to be their RB1 after he was pretty dreadful last year in Dallas. So again, this entire AFC South is just a division where I need to see you actually be good before I can truly believe that you're going to be good again in 2024. So I have the Vikings winning this one as well.
Tony Pollard is an example of how fast NFL life can go. I recall vividly, and it doesn't feel that long ago, during fantasy drafts, thinking, I'm going to get him late because he's fast and he's younger than Ezekiel Elliott. And now you look down at the page of your fantasy draft rankings and you're like, ooh, I can get Pollard, but he's too old. Isn't that weird how quickly running backs...
I'd argue it was as recent as last year that people were arguing that when he fully took over that job in Dallas, people were like, okay, this is his time to really become a top 5 running back. And nope, just never really happened.
Yeah, Alexander Madison can tell you how that situation works.
Right.
The next game this is habitually my least favorite game of the Vikings season.
Always an ugly game.
Yep, I like this one less than going to Green Bay because you never know what to expect when you go to Chicago. There's always some weird atrocity that happens, and it's sloppy. Like the play doesn't matter if the Bears are 8-2 by that time or the Vikings are 8-2. They play down to each other's level or play up. I don't think that they will win this game. Let's see, Sunday, right before Thanksgiving, November 24th. But this is my last Vikings loss for a while. Do you have them losing against the Bears?
Yeah, I just think 3 straight road games, that's eventually going to take a toll on you. I
Mm-hmm.
think Caleb Williams is going to be really good. That secondary in Chicago might be the best secondary in the entire NFL when it's all said and done, with all the moves that they've made. And then their linebacker duo is absolutely fantastic too. You bring in DeAndre Swift at the running back spot. I think they've got too many strong positions for me to truly believe that they're going to be horrible in 2024. So I have the Vikings losing at Soldier Field this season.
All right, let's do these next three in a bunch because they're all three at home. And this is where, if you're a Viking fan, at least per my prognostication, that things are going to get exciting. They first in this homestand take on the Cardinals, who this is my surprise playoff team this year. I think they get into the 7th seed. I trust their coaching staff. It's a bunch of old Zimmer defensive coaches, oddly enough. And I still think Kyler Murray is really good, and Marvin Harrison is guaranteed to be a star. So all that said, I still have the Vikings defeating them on December 1st. And then probably the most exciting game on the schedule, if you consider good health, would be Cousins versus Darnold because of the grudge match. I also have the Vikings winning that because I just trust the Vikings structural organization to defeat Cousins after he chose them over us, as petty as that sounds. And then they get their revenge on Monday Night Football, if it stays that way, against Caleb Williams' Bears at home. So I have the Vikings winning 3 in a row at home, getting it to 7-7, thinking, oh my gosh, we're going to do it. But don't listen to me with the next 3. What do you got for this 3 home game stand?
I have a victory over the Cardinals, kind of the same story as you. I
Mm-hmm.
think you got to come home during this 3 game stretch and really try to salvage the rest of this season. But I have them. I have them losing to Kirk Cousins and the Falcons. I think the Falcons
Okay.
are going to at least be decent this year. And I don't know, whatever juju Kirk Cousins has when it comes to playing these weird games where it's kind of a revenge game, kind of not, where I don't know. I could see him just going for 350 yards, 4 touchdowns, just out of nowhere, even if it's a bad season in Atlanta. I could see him just doing that just because he's capable of doing it whenever he wants. But yeah, I have him losing to Atlanta, and then I have him beating the Bears in the second matchup against that team.
So that's let's see, a 2-1 home stand
Two
for
and one
you. Yep.
homestand.
And this
Yep.
is for Vikings enthusiasts. This is only the second time in US Bank's stadium history that they've had 3 back-to-back home games. And I can tell you because my wife starts to say again once we get to the 3rd week in a row driving up there, that is 4 hours away. So I have set the table here. We are December 17th, the Tuesday after Monday Night Football. The Vikings are 7-7. You've got your ESPN playoff machine up. So do I. We're talking about what they need to do. This is vintage Vikings. This is what always happens. They find a way to the middle of the pack. But disappointingly, because we have no JJ McCarthy to pivot to, I think the Vikings lose the next 3. And we're right back to where we were last year, thinking, all right, well, but the difference now is even though I think Sam Darnold will have about 3,600 yards, 25, 26 touchdowns, 12 picks, a good season, he's not going to matter anymore. We get to this week 18, they lose to the Lions, and we'll tell him, you know what, why don't you go quarterback the Seahawks or the Raiders or something? We've got our guy in JJ McCarthy. So sadly, I have the Vikings losing on the road to Seattle. Have you ever heard that before? Losing at home again to the Packers because I'm just a sadist. And then I don't know if the Lions will have anything to play for. The Vikings could finish 8-9 if that is a meaningless game, like it always seems to be in week 18 for the purple team. 7-10, this guy says, I was hoping to be talked into 8-9 by the start of the regular season, but when your franchise quarterback tears his meniscus, I don't have that level of optimism. Give us your take on these final 3 and an end of season record prognostication.
Yeah, same story as you, kind of. I have them losing at Seattle because that's what the Vikings always do. They find a way to lose when they go out west to Seattle. So I'm losing that game in disappointing fashion, and then I actually have them beating Green Bay.
Cool.
I just think they're going to split with the Packers this year. So I would say if they win on road at Lambeau, I'd say they'd lose this one, but I have them losing at Lambeau, so I'm going to take the Vikings to win this one. And what honestly might be a meaningless game at this point in the season, depending on what happens with Detroit and the rest of the NFC. And then I have them losing at Detroit in Week 18 to
And what
finish
is
it.
and did
8-9.
you 8 and 9? Okay, that is
Yeah.
that's what Yannick Eckhart predicted. Or actually, no, Yannick settled at 7-10, but wanted to talk himself into 8-9. One of our good friends at Purple PTSD in Vikings territory, Kyle Jodry. How do you say his last name? Is Jowdry or Jodry?
I believe it's Jowdry.
Jowdry? Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I thought it was one or the other. Anyhow, we've been associated with him for about 5 years. He picked the Vikings to go 10-7. And I was,
Oh,
yeah, when I gathered all the predictions, he was the first to reply. And I was like, oh, wow, we're doing this, huh? And then he was the only one that went full tilt into a playoff berth, and we will take it. Although it remains to be seen. All right, I got one more thing for you. Super Bowl prediction. I know that you've kicked that around your head. This guy, first time I've said it anywhere out loud, I have it in writing now on Vikings territory. I'm picking the Bengals to do the thing over the Eagles. When you look at the NFC, we're kind of right where we were last year when the Vikings, in theory, could have been contenders. If you believe in the Super Bowl hangover of the 49ers, which is a very real thing, the hangover, the Eagles looked so goofy down the stretch. I don't trust the Cowboys anymore. Mike McCarthy, they're going to go 9-8, and he's going to get fired, and Belichick's going to take over. I can already see it coming. The NFC's wide open. But I ultimately picked the Eagles because of their roster. I don't trust their coaching staff a whole lot. I just don't think that the Chiefs will three-peat because no team has ever done it. I'll probably eat those words, but I'm taking the Bengals over the Eagles in my Super Bowl prediction. You?
yeah. Vikings fans might want to turn this off
Oh
at this
no, you're
point in the
really doing
episode.
that?
I have the Chiefs three-peating.
Oh, okay.
I have them
Well,
winning the
that's
Super
fine with
Bowl.
me.
Yeah, but and this is kind of a strategic play for next year on my
Mhm.
end. I'm taking the Packers in the NFC because I want them to have that Super Bowl hangover next year
Okay.
when JJ McCarthy is back, and then the
Yeah.
Vikings can go run through the NFC North next year.
So is it double insult to the NFC Championship is Lions Packers, or do you have the
Yeah,
is it?
I kind of
Oh my
see that.
God.
Yeah.
I remember, let's see, you were probably in your late teens, the NFC Championship of 2010, Packers and
Oh,
Bears.
Packers Bears.
Yeah,
Yeah,
when
yeah, I
when
remember
when
that
that
game.
Bears
Yeah.
backup quarterback like they announced he was going to start like 2 days before because something wrong with
Yep.
Cutler. That was the most nauseating NFC Championship that you could ever
So
watch.
bad. So bad.
Nasty. All right, so you got 8-9. You have the Chiefs over the Cheese team in the Super Bowl. I have 7-10 for the Vikings and the Bengals over the Eagles in the big game. All right, man. Can you believe it? When we're back next week, we will be digesting what we think is a Vikings win over the Giants and previewing
So bad.
Murderers Row against the 49ers. But nevertheless, it is back and it is here. Any closing arguments for the gang?
Not really. I'm just excited to watch some football this weekend. Let's get it, baby.
All right, man. We'll talk to you in 1 week then, okay?
Sounds good. See you then.
Yep, later.